bird on a tree. I'm just sitting here. I got time. It's clear to see from up here. The world seems small. We can sit too.
Hi everyone, this is Monica Ramirez, Warrior of Love, and you're in Soul Talk. Thank you for being here. And today we have a very special invite from my city where I was born, Mexico City. And we are very excited to present you David Ortega. He have a very, very interesting background because he is not only a coach in different things that we're going to be talking about, but he's also a scientist and molecular biomedicine specialist. So combining the two sides of from science and spirituality, that's what the world actually needs. And thank you, David, for being here with us in Soul Talk. I really appreciate that you're accepting my invitation in Soul Talk.
Thank you, Monica, for the invite. And it's a pleasure to talk about what I do and my passions in your podcast and giving the people the most amount of information that they can use.
I have a question, David. Is, reading your biography, it is very inspiring and very different than all the biographies that I have read from many people that I have interviewed, because you're combining the two parts that usually they were divorced before, science and coaching or spirituality. They were completely divorced because they were considered woo-woo, because come on, science can still prove our spirituality. Even so, we can't even explain it, or God, or whatever. We can't explain factor X or whatever. We can't. But you're, and even with all that, you combine your because you're also a wellness coach and life coach, and so you're combining your life coaching with your scientist in your wellness coaching, or how do you combine both of them? How do you marry both of them in your career?
Well, I began in the science field, and I started to help people to understand their bodies, their nutrition, and from understanding those two pillars, I started to realize that we need to assemble more the picture. And the picture for me is 5 pillars, which are the ones that I use in my life coach and the wellness and science. Because when we add the other 3 pillars, which are the emotions, and then understanding how you feel, understanding how do you process your emotions, how much time do you have to stop to realize that you are doing many things unconsciously, then we move on to having time to do that. And having time to do that is consciousness, is getting into the realm of spirituality and getting into the realm of meditation. I don't like to mix religion, because religion, I think it divides people. And I think that religion is just based on dogmas and rules that many people have to follow, but many times they don't even realize what they are doing. And spirituality for me is a broad concept that doesn't divide, that is inclusive, and that has more also proven facts that we can simply realize when we have time to stop, time to pause, time to be in stillness, and time to be reflecting. And actually, many of the scientists began with spirituality, began by having time, began by reflection. In Greeks and Romans, many of those scientists, that they have time to think about nature and to realize the phenomena. They started to explain many things that now we are just picking up from there and calling in another name. and just using in psychology and using in many of the science fields. So that's how I started to assemble the whole picture. And the fifth pillar is the one that is about abundance. And I don't call it financial freedom because financial is just in the material sense. For me, it's a broader term also that is abundance, because abundance for me is having the five pillars, having your health, having your knowing your body, knowing your emotions, having good relationships, and having time to pause in your life and to reflect what you are doing. And of course, trying as much as possible to have values and do the right things to do.
I do agree. The new science, well, I want to think that it's changing now with quantum physics and so forth, because they're starting to prove many of the spirituality that now we're living. And but yes, our philosophers and the scientists, where it started, it was in the ancient times, but they were trying to put it aside, like that part did not exist. When you're totally right, it started then. And and that's where, and it's so important, something that I have learned. One of the things how I heal myself, it was actually involving our mental health, because that's what it creates all the problems. And our emotional parts is where it creates all the physical problems, or sickness or illness that we can have, including the weight.
Yes, yes. A lot of things start with the emotions, and realizing that from early childhood we don't learn to love ourselves, to accept, and to start just, well, of course at that age we are not developed to understand the examples that we are given many times, and unfortunately it's just a repetitive cycle. That's why the book that I have behind speaks about that, speaks about those cycles, and how as parents we don't realize, we don't stop, and we just keep messing the next generations with many examples of pain or unconsciousness. And if we just stop and realize what we are doing and the damage that is doing to the genes, to the brain, to the future stages of adulthood for many of the children, we would pay more attention to how we are parenting, in spite of not having been trained about that. It's just having more consciousness and time to pause. No.
I see that you have in your pillars nutrition, metabolism, emotional resilience, meditation, consciousness, and abundance.
Yes.
Right? Can you explain us how do you work with people with your pillars?
Yes, of course. Well, I usually begin with the first one, which is nutrition, because it's the easiest way to get to people on how they eat and understanding their bodies, and how many of the food that they are eating is just priming them into certain kind of emotions, and also trying to not lose weight, but being in the right kind of acceptance of their bodies and being healthy, because you can probably have 5 or 6 kilos or kilograms or pounds above your weight and be completely healthy, and you can have probably your weight and be very athletic, but you can have many deficiencies. So it's not just about the appearance, it's more about your internal health, and being more mindful about paying attention to those markers that we have in our internal health, and not having anxiety, for example, to eat, having that process of understanding how our digestion is taking time, And then once people understand that and start eating healthier and realizing by themselves that they are not doing it in the right way, and I mean each person has its own right way because each person reacts and processes the different nutrients in a different setting. So that's what they have to figure out by changing many things, by supplying others, and by understanding how the metabolism works.
And the funny part is, I still meet doctors, and you tell them, okay, what diet I should be or the patient should be, and they say food is not important. It's like we're in 2022. Really, we the majority of the human beings we know that whether get us sick or healthy or we can fix a problem of whatever it is through food.
Yes.
It is what we eat is how we're gonna be getting sick or healthy. And it is incredible that there's still doctors are saying that. And I encounter one endocrinologist here that says, "Oh no, food doesn't do anything. Just the medicine, the pill, will fix the problem of endocrinology." And it's like really, like it is incredible that they still doctors
Yeah.
that they have patients that they're doing the practice and they still do not see the importance of the nutrition.
Yes. That's something that, for example, I really was very um, worried about when I was teaching students of medicine and nutritionist. I was very, very strict in the sense that they have to understand the body and not just the symptoms, because they are being trained to just react to the symptom and try to give a medication or a prescription for the symptom, and they just learn by memory, but they don't think. that's that's the main problem of the education in terms of the physicians, of the medical doctors, the traditional way. And that's completely wrong, because they don't even know how the body works and the biochemistry of our body. And food is medicine. The other artificial things that they are creating is just to alleviate the symptom, but it's giving more side effects. So
I totally agree with you. And I have a question regarding this, and it's been in the back of my head, and I've been doing my research, but this is not my expertise or not my area. Even if I heal myself through changing my way of eating, but it's not my expertise. This is, I have heard many times, and I want to see if this is a myth or not, that it depends on the type of blood that you are. It is you're more carnivorous, or you can go more vegetarian. That is true, or it's just a myth.
it's just a myth. It's not about the blood. It's more about how you process the food. And how you process the food is only understood by changing many of the things that you are eating and trying to figure out how your body is processing them. Understanding in terms of well, there are multiple markers in your body that we can measure. Of course, there are hormones like insulin, like leptin. There are other markers such as the glucose that you have in the blood, many other markers in the urine that you are going to release also, and how you are processing proteins. So we have to look for specific things so that we can know if you are really absorbing the things. And many of the mental illnesses, for example, are just a deficiency of minerals. So if people understood that minerals are just like the oil for the brain, they would start treating many of the diseases like depression, anxiety, or even schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, they would start to treat them by making tests, biochemical tests about how people are processing minerals and changing their diet, because many times the diet is just very poor and they are just eating processed food. So all of the chemicals that is in processed food, of course, is creating anxiety, depression, and many of these diseases, even ADHD, no?
Yes, and right now we have an epidemic of a lot of mental diseases, and more after the pandemic.
Yes.
And, and yes, at least I can say in United States when we were in lockdown that we couldn't. The majority of people started eating more sweets and more sugars and more carbohydrates, and that's when you can see now in kids in schools and from elementary to even to college, they went into a big depression.
Yeah.
It was not only for the social interacting, it was also for what they were feeding themselves. And
Yes, but that's amazing that understanding that all of the measures that were taken during the pandemic started to trigger many of the mechanisms of how we respond to the world. And they change inner things inside of us, such as serotonin levels, dopamine, and many of course, of the hormones, insulin, leptin, all of those were going to be triggered because they are linked together in the social connection that we have. Social connection with other people and not being able to gather with your family, with your friends, not even seeing people in the street, just messed up many of the markers and hormones that we have that are working together. It's just like a symphony. I always like to think of our body and the signals, because there are millions of signals that come into play as an orchestra. So every single organ, cell, tissue has its own function and it knows what to do. But if we start um, changing the environment outside, of course, it's going to prime the inside. And we are going to mess with the rhythm and with the patterns of the music that we are supposed to have. So when we change the outside in such a drastic way and from one day to the next one, that's what gave way to changing internally how we were going to react. No.
I agree. And well, we're touching your second pillar in their metabolism.
Yes, metabolism is really, really important, that we know that we need to go out for light. We need to go out in the sun to start the synchronization of our internal clocks. So those are the master clocks that we need to set up in the morning and try to look, not directly, but trying to look to the sun so that we can start these kind of hormones that are going to lower some of them, like cortisol, and upgrade other ones like melatonin and serotonin, and many of the hormones that are going to activate the glucose mechanisms to start processing the one that you already have in your blood in the morning.
And the funny part is, I do have, I'm still running with the programs that like do not look at the sun directly. You know, it's gonna damage your eyes and so forth. But I do have many friends that actually go outside in the mornings when the sun is not so brilliant, and they are do sun glazing.
Yes.
And according to them, they been healing themselves physical illness just doing that every day. And what part it is true, and to what part is just a myth that is gonna damage us or is gonna heal us.
No, that is true. That is true. We should watch the sun in the morning, preferably before 7 a.m. So just when the sun is just rising, in that hour that is just rising is not dangerous, and you can look at it. Of course, you're not going to look at it 1 hour. You are just going to take like some few minutes, 5, 10, 15 minutes at the most, and that's it. And it's not just paying, I mean, taking your look to the sun. So you are just taking in the rays. All of that UV light is going to set up these circadian rhythms and transform the many of the vitamins that we need in order to process. Well, not many, one of them, that is vitamin D. Vitamin D needs that kind of wavelength to start the process of uh, creating balance in minerals that is going to absorb, such as calcium, which is a extremely important mineral for the whole metabolism. Magnesium also. All of those minerals are very important in terms of energy, in terms of the glucose metabolism and carbohydrate metabolism.
And how the I have also I'm sorry to bring you out with all
It's
these myths that I have heard that some of them I follow, some of them I don't. But for our viewers, actually, it might be very interesting to see to hear this. I have heard I use magnesium in liquid because one of my teachers told me that's the best way to absorb your body. And many people says no, you have to take the pill of magnesium. Which one works better, in liquid or in pill?
it you should have a biochemical test in order to answer that question, because, for instance, I take the pill. I don't take it in liquid form, and for me it works. And for my metabolism, it works. I feel energetic. I feel that also my brain is processing everything well, and we need it for the body and for the brain. So it depends on every person. I mean, if you take pills and it's not making any changes, and you feel that you are not being more energetic, or you are being lethargic, then it's not working in that form, or you're not absorbing it well. That's
Yeah.
just a test and see.
And well, your third pillar is emotional resilience.
Yes, once you understand your nutrition, your body, and how many of the internal thing works, now we can go to the emotional side, and we can start digging up in first, of course, even if it's fearful, the childhood experience. No, many of the messages that we are still as adult pulling in our lives and repeating patterns are from that stage, because it's the way we learn to live, because it's the environment we grew up in, and we still feel that connection with certain toxic things that we don't realize until we bring the pattern, until we bring any kind of relationship that is recreating the environment.
That's my forte, emotional part. I am a neurolinguistic programmer. So yes, human beings, we are programmed with many limitations because that's what our ancestors believe. That doesn't make it true, but it's not the fault of anyone. It was just
Yes.
mm, not having completely the whole information. Now, how do you work with people in your pillars with in this area with emotional part?
I try to give them or ask them questions. It depends if I am in an individual way or in a group way. I try to give them questions. I try to give them reflection of what were they living, how their parents were in terms of expressing emotions, in terms of how do they demonstrate affection, in terms of how do they allow them to decide their own lives, or they were overprotective, in terms of the values, if they were religious or spiritual or many of those things, and also how if they even interact with them in terms of having a dialogue, because many of the parenting issues also come from they don't pay attention to their children and they don't have time to talk about many things.
It's because we go with the gender division that it was long time ago. The male should be act this way and the female should act this way. And more in the culture that we grew up, it was more divided in the ways they have how they should function. And the bread, the one that was gonna bring the bread and paying for the bills in a macho society, in the patriarch society, it was the male. And the one that take care of the home and the kids, it was the female. Now things have changed. It was wrong in that time dividing that in that way because the daddy was not going to be involved in the kid's life, and the mother would not wanted to get out of an abusive relationship because she didn't know how to make money. So it was wrong in that time, but now in this time have changed. The roles are more. She's going to be bringing money in, and he's going to be more involved with the kids. It's going to be more balanced. But we're still stuck in there in the old thinking on the patriarch society that it didn't work then and still don't work now. How do you work with men now for you? Females, I see them working with themselves now. In all the coaches, the spiritual coaching that you see around the world, you always see more females than males. I'm not going to deny they're not males, but it's the minority. So I'm so glad that you're a male, that you're a coach, that you're. I imagine that you attract more males than females because you're a coach, a male coach, and males are too afraid to come with female coaches. So, how do you see that difference in your coaching with males than females?
Yes. For example, I work in Spanish and I work in English. In English, I have had males that are following me and that they also are interacting with me and that have done programs with me. But in the Spanish side or in the Latin American side, it's not that way. It's just still the old paradigm of not realizing that they have to work with their emotions, that they have to recognize that they need support, and that's also very strict for them in spite of not recognizing it. It is very difficult for a Latin American man to ask for help, to be supported, and to have someone to speak with, to let the emotions side go out and be vulnerable, and just realize that they also have a lot of issues in terms of the examples that they saw. And probably, as I speak in the book, it's just a cycle that we haven't learned how to break. But if there are any kind of men listening into this part, I really invite you to be vulnerable, to be open about your emotions. No one is going to judge you now. And even if you don't speak, many times we think that people are just going to judge us if we speak and if we are vulnerable, but they are doing anyway. So what are you afraid of? Showing how you are, showing the damage that you have, showing that is just courage. And courage is being able to heal yourself. Also, in terms of the male side, we were never allowed to say the word love yourself. It was like prohibited to say love to you, because that's like a female word or a female side. And we also have to recognize that we are feminine side and male side. So we have that in our psyche, in our emotions, in our spirituality. We have those both sides.
Because males would not be, they were not allowed to actually show emotions.
Yeah.
They learned how to hide emotions. In fact, when males are talking, it's like, what do you think? Instead of how do you feel? That's the question that they always ask. And the females is, what do you feel? More than what do you think?
Yeah.
So it was not allowed. But I want to think that times are changing, and it is so important that there are more male coaches, so like that they can guide males because they will not be open to a female so easy. Thank
Yes.
you for doing this job.
I really, really hope that in these new times that many males start opening, because we need to balance everything. And it is not a fight between genders. We have to learn to work together, and we have to learn to accept that we are different in terms of the biology, in terms of many things, of how our brain works. And respecting that also, that's extremely important to understand that the male brain is not the same as the female brain in terms of the processing, in terms of how they lighten up many of the pathways and how they start addressing the world.
But many of those are just programs,
Yes.
programs, and old programs that they've been by since our ancestors, that they wire our brain in a certain way that we can change it. We can rewire our brain in the moment we choose different. And that's why it is important. I mark again that it's important to be more male coaches because like that we can actually change the world. I'm not denying that the females we don't have issues that we have to work. We do have many issues that we have to work with ourselves. But at least the majority are open. That's why you see many women taking classes on self-help or self-development or things like that for because they wanted to go to a therapist or to a coaching. They're more open. They understand that is getting to a coach or a therapy is not because they're crazy. Is because they actually need it. And every single human being, I have never met one human being that do not have something to heal.
I think there are now.
Yes. And when I heard, no, that's for crazies, if that's the case, then everybody is crazy.
Yes.
Because everybody needs coaching or therapy or work with some inner issues to heal themselves.
Yes, at least the layout, at least the map, in order to understand that probably if you want to be self-taught, if you want to figure out by reading books or by understanding content, you need to know the content. You need to know something about what is happening, because just going into the world of the websites or of internet and looking for things can be very dangerous in terms of leading you to the wrong path. So it's just a guiding system to understand yourself, and from there you can work alone if you want. No.
I do agree. And I see one of your other pillars is one of my favorites is meditation.
Yeah.
What kind of meditation you do? Or you
Well,
take work?
I practice deep. I don't practice a certain specific type. I use sometimes guided meditation. Sometimes I use just nature sounds. Sometimes I use the mindfulness meditation, and I think that's the most common that I use, the mindfulness, to pay attention to my breathing, to the to how your mind starts going away into other things, but not stressing about that. And I think many times while I do exercise, because I like to swim, for example, while I'm swimming, I think many times I'm meditating. No, I am doing that process of the mind that is relaxing, that is entering another state, and it's flowing into something that is um, taking the attention away from the worries, away from the problems, away from the emotions, and that's when messages and many ideas or creative thinking comes.
Meditating. There are thousands of ways of meditating. Like just focusing. I tell people, it's okay, if you don't want to sit down, because I have heard, they give me anxiety. Okay, when you are cooking, okay, just focus in that process while you're cooking. Nothing else, no problems, nothing that you have to do later on, just while you're cooking. The same applies when you're putting makeup. Do the same thing. Don't think in things that you have to do later on. Just focus in that moment. And that's one way of meditating.
Yes, yes,
Thousands of ways of meditating. I love transcendental meditation, but everybody's different. Everybody's different, and all of them are so helpful and will transform your life.
yes.
I love, that's why it's one of my favorite ones.
Mm.
And your next pillar is the conscience and abundance. How do you work with them, with your clients?
Well, I think that if you have been aligned in those four pillars, the nutrition, your metabolism, emotions, consciousness, or meditation, then you, as a consequence, you will have abundance. You will attract abundance because you are already aligned, because you are already in the path of loving yourself, in spite of right now or when you finish the program or when you finish the coaching, you are still working on loving yourself. You are attracting that energy, and abundance for me is it's first working with you, changing the way you think, leaving many of the limiting beliefs. And once you leave those limiting beliefs and you start accepting that the universe or God or whoever you believe in is having abundance for you, is having a lot of things, infinite possibilities for you, then things start to come in your direction, in your manifestation.
It's a state of conscience, basically. What you accept for yourself, and if you're worthy or not.
Exactly.
Like that, you can open the doors to receive whatever you are wishing for. But if you're asleep and you're not conscious and not present, you go with your old programs, and the abundance just get farther away. Oh
Exactly.
well, oh, you will have abundance, but not of the things that you actually want.
Yes, yes, because that's, for example, wealth. No, you can have material wealth and you can be financially millionaire, but in many of the other ways or pillars of your own life, you are lacking, no, lacking health, lacking time, lacking relationships. And for me, that's not abundance. That's just material freedom, no? So it's also having clarity. What I work with a lot of clients is that, and people is they need to know what they want. If they don't know what they want, that's the problem. That's the blocking mechanisms of not receiving what they desire. They can desire things and they can have a picture and they can even have a vision board, um, everything, but they don't have clarity. When I ask the questions, why do you want that? That's when I can realize that they don't even know. That's just another program, no? That they are just replying to.
I call the want is your yellow brick road, like the Wizard of Oz. Because in a way, yes, that's where you want to go to the Emerald City. You have to follow the yellow brick road, and that's your want. And that's your want. So yes, it is so important, and many people do not know what they want. They know what they don't want, but it haven't they they haven't realized what they want because they're so programmed on want what other people want from them, not
Yes.
what they want for themselves. How do you work with people like that?
Well, I first start asking those kind of questions of how do you see yourself in the next, for example, 6 months. Then let's go for a year, then let's go for 5 years, and then let's go for 10 years, no? And I believe that that's very powerful. Your vision of the future is not that you are living in the future, is how you are seeing yourself. How do you want to get to that stage? And trying to shape your future self with the characteristics that you want. For example, in my life, that's how it worked for me very well. When I was in my 20s, in early 20s, and I started working in pharma industry, that I was in that corporate world, I I had very clear idea that it was just temporal and it was just a step to give me the life that I wanted. So when a friend asked me, how do you see yourself in your 40s? I just reply, when I'm 40 or when I get to 40, I want to do what I love. I want to choose what I want. And I don't want to depend on a job. I just want to be free and realize that I have the life that I wanted. So for my 40th one birthday, I had that life. I had that life that I could realize that I made it. How? Just by having the clarity, just by having the steps and the discipline to work towards towards my freedom and towards doing what I love. No?
Yes, I did those questions many years ago. It's like what I would do when I get to my 50s. And when I got there, it's like, oh, okay, let me make a recount. Have I have done this or not? Or what do I have to do to get what I wanted when I was 20? That I asked for those things. What did make you go into this field? Because you have a degree in molecular biomedicine. What it got you get to coaching with people?
My life. I think that my own life gave me the answers, and I was just very curious as a scientist. So I allow myself to reflect a lot in my life and to think a lot if I was fulfilled, if I was happy, if what I was doing had meaning. And each year I have a tradition of reflecting about my life and the year. And doing that was very powerful for me because every year I was asking different questions. And that led me to, in the year of 2016, that's when my brother introduced me to the world of coaching. And it just picked up on me. It just called me in a very strong way, and that's when I decided to start transitioning into that world. I was in that year teaching in the academy. I was teaching in medicine and in nutrition, biochemistry, but I started to ask the questions about creating a business, creating a coaching, and based on my own life, based on how I start assembling my life and the way I process the things, the way I understood my body, the way I understood that we are not one single thing. We are not just food, we are not just nutrition, we are not just a body, we are not just emotions, we are not just stillness or consciousness. We are a mixture of and a blend of everything.
I do agree with that. And yes, it takes us to very interesting paths where we are now, and where people can find you, David.
I have the main part that they can find me is in my website is www.davidortegab.com. That's the main gateway to many of my channels. And in Facebook also they can find me as David Ortega B. That's the easiest way. And I appear as molecular biomedicine specialist. And that's the way it has to appear. And in Instagram, Dave Ortega B.
I will set up the links for anyone that wanted to contact you, so like that they can contact you, because it is important, the work you're doing, and it is important that I hope we have many males looking at this video, and of course if you're a female, he can help you out at the same time. But I believe there are more males that are more open to male coaches than female coaches, and it is amazing that there are people like you working in English or Spanish. He have both languages, and thank you so much. Do you have something else that you would like to add?
And well, just for the people that are listening, give yourself the opportunity to experience a different kind of life. I know that many of us got stuck in some of the programming, and we don't seem to find a way to break those cycles, but this is the first steps, and they are just baby steps to get out from there. We are not in a hurry. This takes time, and this is discipline, but that's the best way to live your life.
That is true. Thank you everybody for seeing Soul Talk. This is Monica Ramirez, Warrior of Love. And hey, this podcast and this episode actually help you, share it with your friends. It might be someone else that it might be interested to see it, and you might be helping someone else. And thank you for being you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica. Bye.
In the great outdoors, forever free. Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell